The Yes to Proposition CC campaign has finally begun in earnest. The group had a kickoff press conference on October 2nd. The measure would allow the state government to retain surplus tax revenue. Ballots will be mailed out to voters on October 15th. David, how do you see this one coming down?
I just want to say that among the articles of impeachment against President Nixon was attempting to use the IRS for political purposes against his political enemies, which Barack Obama did on a far larger and more successful scale than Nixon ever dreamed about. The Proposition CC thing about saying we will retain surplus revenue is another way of saying we're going to take your refund. The Taxpayers' Bill of Rights says that government spending can go up automatically as fast as population growth plus inflation. And if you want government spending to go up faster than that, just ask the voters and they can say yes or no. Usually when local governments in Colorado ask to spend faster, voters often agree because the local governments come forward with specific things they're going to spend the money on, and the voters decide if that makes sense. Proposition CC is the opposite of that. It has some empty words about how the money is supposedly going to be spent, but it's not binding, and we know from the last time we had a Tabor timeout that all the promised revenue for CU and the rest of everything else they promised didn't get spent that way. So this is like permanently giving up consent. It's like once you're in the mafia, you never get out. If you vote for CC, you will never, ever get a chance to vote on how fast the size of Colorado government should grow, and you'll never get another refund again.
And once you sit at this table, you never get out of talking about Tabor, which we passed 27 years ago. Eric, what do you think about the chances of a CC?
Just because it's not in my personality to let David get the last word, I will have to...
Back to Nixon?
The point is well taken with respect to the IRS, and that clearly was an abuse with Lois Lerner and others. That said, there is no equivalency between Donald Trump and, quite frankly, any previous president, much less the immediate previous president in Barack Obama. So we'll agree to disagree on that particular one. With respect to Prop CC, to say a campaign begins in earnest when the campaign kickoff is 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks before ballots go out, makes me question the definition of the word earnest. I don't know if there's a perverse genius here to the proponents of this measure who have decided to keep it under the radar and just let what is very favorable ballot language. If you just read the ballot language in front of you on the ballot, it's mom and kittens and apple pies. And I think their hope is that the language itself carries this across the finish line. I see this as a precursor to a much bigger fight, which the state is looking to in 2020, when there are forces out there who want to have a ballot proposition to outright repeal Tabor, which I think is several bridges too far to get past the voters in Colorado. But on the one hand, if this CC, which is a fairly tepid measure compared to a total repeal, if that goes down, that's clearly a sign that there's no appetite for the outright repeal. But on the other hand, if it passes, then voters are going to think, well, we've already taken care of some of the problem. So what is that incentive? So I think either way this comes out, it makes the lot of those who want to have an all-out war next year over Tabor, it makes their lot much more difficult.
Natasha, happy kittens or a Trojan horse?
Well, what's interesting is that, yes, Tabor has been a conversation at this table all the time, but so has education and transportation funding, which is where the funds, if this was passed, would go to. So we're managing to just lump together all the big things that we like to talk about, but conversely, all of Colorado like to talk about as well. But we've turned down funding for transportation and education time and time again. So how that plays into this larger conversation of Tabor and whether we like it or not, whether we want to do something or not, is really, that's going to play out in interesting ways. I think, yes, this is the start of the conversation, but it's also a long continuation. For years, they've been building the sort of grassroots work around saying that Tabor and Gallagher are the reasons that we can't do X, Y, Z in this state. And that conversation is had in many different sectors. So it's going to continue. And unfortunately, I think we're going to keep talking about Tabor for a very long time.
27 more years. Krista, can you see CC passing?
You know what? One more point about impeachment. I'm kidding. I don't think it's going to pass. I think people want their refunds. And here's the deal. I gave up my refund with the city of Littleton because the city of Littleton is very well run. It's a beautiful little city. I have every faith that they're using every dime of my taxpayer money to do something good. I don't have that faith in the state government, honestly. We expected roads from them this last time around and said they spent it on kindergarten and entitlement that I'm not even sure they can afford. They also did a bunch of politically correct stuff and limiting people's freedoms. They made some really poor choices. I'm not going to give them extra money. I would rather have the refund, even if it's $20. I know that's $20 I can spend better than they can.